3 Israeli hostages have now been released by Hamas. The women were collected in Gaza by Red Cross officials and are now back in Israel. Emily Damari, Doron Steinbrecher and Romi Gonen are being reunited with family and undergoing medical checks. The women are the first of 90 Israeli hostages said to be released during a 6-week ceasefire now in effect in Gaza. Around 1,900 Palestinian prisoners will also be freed under the deal. Since fighting paused this morning, thousands of Gazans have been reuniting with loved ones and returning to what's left of their homes. 8 trucks have also been arriving in Gaza with desperately needed supplies. Now let's go to DW's correspondent Tania Krämer. She's outside the Sheba hospital near Tel Aviv, where we are expecting the 3 hostages to be checked over. Tania, talk us through the release of these 3 hostages.
Yeah, we've seen over the course of the late afternoon when the International Red Cross then went with a convoy to the meeting point where then Hamas handed over these 3 young women, Emily Damari, Doron Steinbrecher and Romi Gonen. And they were taken then out and then handed over to the Israeli forces, special forces, and we were updated on the way that they're now in the hands of the special forces and now taken then from there into Israeli territory, where they have been, now undergoing medical checks. We understand also some of the family members are in this area, and then from there, depending, on their medical condition, we're expecting them to then being flown here to Sheba Medical Center, the hospital here. Unless one of them would be having an emergency in terms of their medical conditions, they would be taken to a hospital closer to the Gaza Strip in the border area there. Now, everybody here in this hospital where I'm standing, more and more people are turning up here. Everybody is just watching this very, very closely. I mean, there is a lot of, joy and happiness as well. Although, most of the people here around me is also from the media, but many people are asking, about them. With this shadow, however, knowing, this is just the beginning of a process and there are so many that need to follow. And at the same time, obviously, we are also watching very closely now the release of the Palestinian prisoners, 90 Palestinian prisoners that are supposed to be released in exchange. That should happen, once the hostages now, since they're now in Israeli territory, they should then get the green light to be released to the occupied West Bank and to East Jerusalem.
Now, after 15 months in captivity, you've touched upon this, but what conditions will they likely be in?
Well, we can imagine that it was a very difficult time for them, and we know that some of them, when they were taken hostage on October 7, at least 2 of them were shot and injured. For example, Romi Gonen, she was at the Nova Music Festival, and she was able to talk to her mother before she was taken captive, and she said that they were shot and that she was injured. The same for Emily Damari as well. She was taken from her home when she was there in the safe room. She was also injured, so we can imagine that there will be some medical issues, as well as, we should not forget, they have been now for 15 months in captivity. They have been also experiencing the same what Palestinians in Gaza have experienced, the war and air bombardment for 15 months. Now, we don't know where they have been held for most of the time, whether it was underground, whether they have been moved also to other places, how, their access to food and water was. So we will know all these details a bit later, but I think from the pictures that we have been able to see, they were standing on their own feet, so that means they were able to go to the car where they were taken, but we will we will certainly know much more about their medical conditions as the evening progresses. Now they will be flown here to the hospitals where they will be staying. There's an extra very area has been put in place for them. There's a very strict protocol as well. The media has been asked to be very sensitive to this situation, that they can reunite with their families, that they can take control again also of their own lives.
Now, in exchange for these hostages, Palestinian prisoners are also due to be released by Israeli authorities. What do we know about these prisoners?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all in all, there's several hundred prisoners that will be released in this first phase. But right now, today, we understand that there are 90 Palestinians. Their names have also been published on a list. We understand most of them have been, are female prisoners, are men of younger age. And also there are at least 8 minors on this list, children that were in Israeli prisons. Some of them have been held in administrative detention. This is a very controversial process where people can be held for many months without being charged or without even knowing what they will be charged of. So sometimes this goes on for months and for years for them. So many of them also were in prison for minor offenses in this batch. So we will see, the process of those people that will be now hopefully released. We have been getting some reports that there were some people disturbing their right-wing settlers near the Ofer prison, where they're all staying right now, from which they will be then transferred either to the occupied West Bank or into East Jerusalem, where then from there they will be taken individually back to their families, who are also waiting for them now, since this news broke that this release and this ceasefire will take place and the hostage deal is there in place. They're all waiting now to see their relatives as well now.
Now we're seeing live pictures here of that prison. There was a delay by Hamas to release the names of the 3 women that were released. Do we know why?
No, we have no further information of that. Hamas put out a statement this morning. They say it was for technical reasons, and then there was a big question mark already. I mean, this whole process is so fragile, and we've seen delay after delay. First, also, the Israeli side had to push it through, and there were also a lot of opposition in Israel against this deal. Then, the vote was very late, so this delayed again the process. But then this morning again, we heard also from the Israeli government that they will not go ahead with this deal if they don't receive the list. Now, Hamas responded that, there were technical issues to that. And then later, the ceasefire also then was basically starting later. And during that period, the ceasefire was supposed to start at 8:30 local time, but then basically Israel said they will not allow the ceasefire to happen now until they have this list. We also have seen many people in Gaza killed during this short period until then the ceasefire came into effect shortly after 11 today.
DW's Tania Krämer there reporting from the Sheba Hospital near Tel Aviv. Thank you, Tania. Let's now bring in DW's Middle East analyst, Shani Rozanes. Shani, the hostage transfer apparently was successful. Hostages are back in Israel. This is just the start of a very, very fragile ceasefire deal, is it not?
Indeed it is. And we were expecting the first today, and then within a week there are going to be another 4 released. And then in the weeks after, every time after a week, there are going to be 3 more released. And the last week, the 6th week of the ceasefire, if we make it there, is going to be 14 hostages released, not all of them alive, probably. Israel have put very clear set of order where the living should be released before any bodies are being released. And of course, women and children are first before men are being released. So this is what we're expecting. But there's so many more things to happen until we make it to the 42nd day, which is officially what this deal is supposed to include. Important, we need to notice this is the day number 16. This is the day where both sides are supposed to be starting to negotiate the next phase, phase 2, where it's supposed to include the release of the remaining 65 Israeli hostages. It's also day 22 is also an important day. That this is the day when Palestinians are allowed to come back to the northern part of the Strip. We are seeing already in the last hours Palestinians trying to find their ways back, but they are not supposed to cross between, there's what Israelis call the Netzarim corridor. It's a corridor that basically cuts the Gaza Strip into two, the northern and the southern part. That would be a crucial part that Hamas very much wants to see. There's a lot of pressure on Hamas to allow people, finally, after all this time, to go back to their houses in the north of Gaza. This is something Israel has been using as a very important strategic leverage. So many more steps on the way, and there's going to be many small hurdles, and we're going to have to see how much do the sides really are the sides committed to this, and how much pressure do the Americans apply to make sure that not only these 40 days are being completed, but rather that we are making it actually to the second phase that is supposed to start back to back.
We're going to start about the American influence on all this a bit later. But first, let's go to the first step today, the actual release of these hostages. And I don't know whether we can play these images that we have seen of the hostages in the car, surrounded by a huge mob
of Hamas militants. Yeah, we see them
masked and armed. What does that?
Well, first of all, let's look at the location. Hamas could have chosen any location it wanted, and they chose to do the exchange and the release of the prisoner into the hands of the Red Cross right at the heart of Gaza City. And that's a symbolic statement. It's not by accident. And of course, when you choose such a location, it's very hard to maintain a sterile zone, which is what the Red Cross would have preferred, following lessons drawn from the previous deal in November 23. And we also know a lot of the hostages who came back said that this very moment of being transferred from Hamas vehicles to the cars of the Red Cross, these were some of the most terrifying moments. Many of them thought, we have maybe survived captivity. Back then it was around 50 days. We're not going to survive that, because you are in a car surrounded by many armed men wearing masks with the green Hamas ribbons on their foreheads. A lot of commotion, a lot of noise, and it seems like a very tense, aggressive experience. And that also probably is not coincidental. This is probably part of the design that Hamas has done for this, trying to state and let's send maybe a last kind of message for those women who have been kept by Hamas for 470 days now.
Shani, we're going to come back to you in a moment, but we want to go to another guest now. Oliver McTernan is the director of the organization Forward Thinking and was involved in negotiations that led to the release of the Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit in 2011. Though he has no formal role in the current talks over the war in Gaza, he regularly speaks with senior figures in both Hamas and the Israeli government, and he joins us from London now. Oliver, thank you for joining us. How do you view this agreement that is now in place? Can this really be a first step to peace?
Well, I think it's a first step, but a very, very fragile step. And I think there's a long way to go. I was listening to the interview yesterday with the Qatari Prime Minister, in which he was emphasizing it was mediation and not the bombing that has brought the hostages home. Now, today, this afternoon, I was comparing President Biden's speech, and he was emphasizing that it was the military action, the bombing, that actually led to the deal. And I think there is the problem, that you've got this contrast. And for me, the comparison between the exchange of hostages in November 23, which was a much more calm, modest affair than this afternoon, which was triumphant and jubilant. I think if you're looking for an argument in support of one, the Qatari or the American. I think the argument is very clear that bombing, military pressure increases resistance. So I think we saw that this afternoon on display in the center of Gaza.
You mentioned the American influence there on this deal. Apparently both the Biden administration and what is to be the Trump administration has been participating in this. How big was this influence?
Well, I think it was enormous. First of all, I think what delayed the deal was the fact that, we had yesterday the Qatari Prime Minister saying actually this deal was in place in December 2023. Biden today said, well, he announced it in May 24. But what delayed its implementation, I think, was Biden's policy of no red lines between America and Israel. In other words, Netanyahu had the clear endorsement of President Biden to pursue a military campaign in the way in which he wanted. And I think that delayed it. Trump coming on the scene, I think, was significant. And I think that Donald Trump was convinced 4 years ago when he left office that he had the answer to the Middle East conflict. And his answer was economic, in one word. And that implied, or what that needed, was to bring together the region in a sort of economic pact. It meant that not just the Emiratis, but also, and more important, Saudi Arabia would join in this, that you would get a reenactment almost of the Arab Peace Initiative of 2002. He was pushing that, and he was convinced this would be the answer. I think that he is not willing to inherit a war that was going on, and I would say he put a lot of pressure behind scenes on Prime Minister Netanyahu to solve the war so that he could restart negotiations on the Abraham Accords. The key to this, I think, is Saudi Arabia's attitude. Up till now, Saudi Arabia have been making it very, very clear they can only join in the Abraham Accords if there is a Palestinian state, if occupation ends and we have a Palestinian state basically based on the international recognized Palestinian territories, West Bank, Gaza and East Jerusalem. If they stick with that, I think we may see a significant shift and we may get some political horizon. We've got a deal now without any political horizon.
Now, very briefly, if you can, what do you think needs to happen next to make this a lasting success?
Well, I think we need to make sure that the spoilers on both sides, and I'd say the spoilers on the Palestinian side are the gangs that were getting rich under the Israeli eyes during the last 15 months, that they don't get an opportunity to recreate problems and go back. We've seen that endless times over the past 15 years, how spoilers have broken down or managed to break previous deals of calm. The other side, of course, is the Israeli side, that there are people ideologically opposed to this deal within the Israeli military. And where there's an interface between Palestinians and Israelis, there is always that risk too, that they will take action. And I've seen that even during the Shani deal, that people who didn't want progress would and were in the know, did things to set back the process.
Oliver McTernan there, thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you.
Maya Roman, she's a family member of two women kidnapped by Hamas on October 7, 2023, and is joining us live from Tel Aviv. Maya, thank you so much for your time. I understand your cousin was released earlier, but your sister-in-law is still being held hostage by Hamas. Let me just start by asking how you feel today.
I'm going through all the emotions, I guess. It's very high highs and very low lows. My cousin Yarden came back to us during the first hostage deal after 54 days. Her sister-in-law, Carmel Gat, is one of the 6 hostages who were murdered at the end of August. And she was due back on the 7th day of the deal. When the first deal blew up, Carmel did not come back to us. And after many more months, we learned of her death. And so, you know, my family, we have intimate knowledge of what it means to have your loved one back, and intimate knowledge of what it means to lose them, and how fragile this line is, and how fragile this moment is. So I think, like many or everyone in Israel today, we're just very, very tense, feeling all the emotions, and you know, relieved to see finally some of the hostages we've been fighting for come back home. You know, seeing the images of Romi and Emily and Doron's mothers, who we've gotten to know these past 15 months, it's beautiful.
You've been campaigning publicly for a deal that would bring the hostages back. How do you see the agreement that's now in place as we go through the first phase of it on day one of a very fragile deal that's just come into effect over the past hours?
So as you said, the deal is very fragile. My understanding and my family's understanding, again, is how crucial time is, because we lost Carmel in the end of August. You know, this deal is very similar to the deal that was already being discussed in May. If we would have gotten that deal passed through, Carmel might have been returning to us, just as Romi and Emily and Doron is. And so our view, and most of the family's view, is that the best deal is the deal that we can get. We don't have time to wait for a perfect deal. So this deal is definitely not perfect, especially, you know, the phases. We are very concerned about the fact that negotiations about the next phase are only beginning on day 16, and we're very worried. But it's the deal that we've got. So we are just going to do our best to make sure that we reach the second phase of the deal and the third phase of the deal, and we leave no one behind.
We're just looking at live pictures of people down at Hostage Square. I guess you've been down there as well, campaigning for what's actually coming to fruition today. But your sister-in-law, as I said, is still in captivity, held by Hamas. Do you know anything about her condition?
No, so as I said, Carmel is not held by Hamas anymore. She was murdered at the end of August, along with 5 other hostages. And so our story is kind of concluded in the sense that Yarden is here with us and Carmel has been buried here in Israel. But it's okay. But we continue advocating with the other families, because we want to make sure that they get, you know, the better ending, the ending they deserve. And so we're trying to make sure that no one else has to suffer the way that Carmel's family had to suffer.
From your point of view, what should the Israeli government be doing then after this first phase of the agreement to make sure that it does all go ahead and it reaches the next phase, which is meant to be even more crucial?
I mean, as I'm sure you've reported, you know, there are problems within the current coalition when it comes to continuing with the deal. And so I think we need a lot of goodwill. We need the public, the Israeli public, to make sure the government understands how much we need this. And it's important for people to understand it's not just the hostage families, it's the entire country. We've been through 15 months of hell. People are tired. People have been going to reserve duty. People have family members they're waiting for, and people have lost family members. And we just need some air to breathe, which is what the return of these hostages symbolize. And I hope that our government is able to understand that and give us this respite that we desperately need. We also know that we need international pressure for that. That is why we are, you know, speaking here to the German public, but all around the world. We know how crucial the Americans have been. My family, you know, we have German citizenship, and so we've been to Germany many times and are in touch with the German representatives. But we need everyone to keep the pressure on both sides. It's very, very difficult, but to make sure that we are able to get everyone back, because every day you know, every day is life and death.
What do you think then of your government's handling of the crisis?
You know, I obviously have a lot of criticism for my government. As I said, this deal is very similar to the deal that was already on the table in May. And I believe that our government could have reached this deal if they wanted to earlier, and they would have saved many lives, lives of hostages, lives of soldiers, and this is, you know, and of course lives of people in Gaza. And so I believe that our government failed us, failed our families specifically, and failed a lot of the hostage families. But that is not my focus at this moment. At this moment, my focus is that they have finally been able to do what's right, and we have to make sure they are able to get to the finish line so that we can start rebuilding and start thinking about what's going to happen here after this.
And Maya, what are your thoughts looking ahead? How do you see the region, your own country, and your neighbours in Gaza? How do you see all of that dynamic developing?
You know, it's very complicated and it's very hard to tell. I think our entire region is obviously been through a lot of trauma and everything has changed, and it's very hard to tell where this is going to go. We are very concerned. Of course, this deal brings with it security concerns for Israel. And, you know, watching Hamas kind of celebrate this victory is not something that we take lightly. It hurts both us, the Israeli public, and the Palestinian people that Hamas is still in power. And so it's a very, very complicated situation. I do hope that the global coalition that is starting to form, that has been forming here in the Middle East, you know, the cooperation that the Americans have with Qatar, with Saudi Arabia, and with the Jordanians and everyone who's involved here, the Egyptians, hopefully they can come up with some kind of better solution that helps us all move forward. But we all know that it's going to be a very long road. And there are no easy magical solutions. This is going to be a long time for all of us to recover and to make sure that, you know, Israel is safe and that the people in Gaza are able to regain some of their lives and rebuild. And so it's going to be just a very, very long while.
Maya Roman, thank you very much for being here on DW News tonight. It's really an historic day and an amazing day for you and those crowds at Hostage Square, as I mentioned. But great to get your take on things. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.